Hello, St Mary Redcliffe Primary School in Bristol. How are you all doing? You all right? Now, I have an amazing niece who goes to your school, and her name is Rowan, and she's in year 2, and she tells me that the year 2 students at your school have been learning about habitats. So what I thought I'd do, maybe if it's all right with you, is show you some of my amazing animals and talk about habitats. Would you like that? Would you enjoy seeing some fantastic animals? Now, my name's Kim, and actually I used to be a teacher, and now I visit schools and I show amazing animals and I teach about habitats, conservation, all kinds of things like that. And now I even have my own centre here in North Devon, so this is Really Wild Planet. This is fairly new, and all my animals here are absolutely thriving. Isn't that cool? Now, I believe that Rowan is in Miss Ali's class, which is 2 White Beam, and also there's another year 2 class, which is 2 Hazel, and Mr. Jones is the teacher there. So hello guys, let's have a look at some animals then. Right, first habitat we're going to talk about is rainforest, because they are my favourite habitats, and you can see around that lots of the animals are in rainforest type enclosures. Now, you probably learned about the different levels that you get in rainforest, and one of the favourite levels that I like to think is the forest floor. So if we were all nature explorers, can you imagine you're a nature explorer and you go to a rainforest and you start looking through the leaf litter, alright? So just like this, you pick up some of the leaf litter, you lift up logs, and then all of a sudden you come across one of these. Whoa! How cool is that? Now, who's good at numeracy? Who's good at maths? Do you want to count the legs? Look at that, isn't that amazing? Now, I expect some of you are thinking it's a centipede, and some of you are thinking maybe it's not a centipede. And if you're thinking it's not a centipede, and if you're thinking it's a millipede, you're absolutely right. Now, these live in lots of habitats around the world, including rainforests, and we get them in our forests as well, but we get small ones. Now, this is actually an African giant millipede, and you can tell because it's so huge. They actually have not 1 million legs, but probably about 212 legs roughly. And in each body segment, they have 4 legs. They have 2 pairs of legs. They can't see very well, but they feel. So they've got those antennae. You might want to do your antenna impressions, look, of a bug. So they use those antennae to feel, and they can also smell, so they can find things to eat. Now, things that they like to eat, they don't eat any animals. They like to eat rotting plants. They like to eat rotting bits of wood. They like to eat fruit, things like that. So I love these guys because they are what I call nature's recyclers. All right, so they recycle things. They munch it up. They go to the toilet, which makes the soil really, really fresh and fantastic for new things to grow. So they're really important in a rainforest, actually, things like this. You'll also get insects that maybe people aren't as keen on. Maybe some people are a bit freaked out by millipedes, but I think they're cool. You'll even get things like this. Look at this. So this is a Madagascan hissing cockroach, a really large cockroach species, but a very slow one. So it's not like the cockroaches that mum and dad might be scared of that run around if you go on holiday. These are a large species. And just like the millipede, they actually eat decaying matter, and they basically recycle things, so they're really important in an ecosystem. So in a rainforest, we think about things that are on the ground, we think about plants, we think about all the little insects, we think about everything else. So within a food chain, within a habitat, it's really important. And actually, if you take one thing away from that habitat, it can have really big impacts. If you remove the trees or you change the trees, like when we think about palm oil, things like that, it has a massive impact because it can't sustain as many species. So they're all really important. How cool are those? Do you like your bugs? I love my bugs. Love my bugs. All right? So nature's recyclers. I hope you're recyclers. Do you all help mum and dad with the recycling? Right, so that's a forest floor species. Should we climb a bit higher? Should we climb up a tree? I've gone now, haven't I? I'll come back down again. So if we imagine we're up a tree, a real insect that we see a lot in different forests around the world, in different rainforests, are things like this. Now this is a stick insect. I'll do my magic trick. Abracadabra. And it's come to life. Can you see that? So this is an Indian stick insect, okay? And these guys live in the trees. They actually live on green plants with long leaves, and they blend in perfectly. Now, unfortunately, lots of things in the wild eat stick insects. So their whole aim in life is not to get eaten, all right? So they rely on camouflage. They only eat plants, okay? So when we think about animals that eat plants, they're herbivores. And if we think about an animal that eats plants and animals, we say it's an omnivore, and plant and animals that eat other animals, they're carnivores. So here we've got a little herbivore. Okay, now that's an Indian stick insect. Now when we think about how animals are different and how they adapt over millions of years to their habitat, take a look at this stick insect. So this one's called a sungaya, all right? And this one actually comes from the Philippines, and it lives on the bark of woods. And it blends into the bark of wood on trees because of this stripe. So it actually looks really, really cool. Oh, it's moving a little bit. It's much slower, and actually this one is a female one, and that spike on her bottom is what she uses to lay eggs. So she wiggles it into the soil like that, and she lays her eggs, whereas stick insects like the Indian stick insect just shake them off, and then those eggs will hatch from the forest floor. So these two, living on different plants, living in different countries, actually blend in, and again are really important because they keep the plants under control, and also, unfortunately, sorry guys, but they end up as food for lots of other animals. So they're really, really important in a rainforest habitat. How cool is that? So whilst we're up in the trees, who'd like to look at something else that lives in the trees, something quite exciting? All right, let's see what I can find. You might have noticed I've got a few boxes around, and I've got all these enclosures, which is really cool. Right, next one's in here. And one of my favourite animals here. Whoa. Let's have a look if we can see my friend Pepper. Hello, Pepper. You going to see me today? Oh, yes, you are. This is Pepper. And Pepper is a crested gecko. And these guys are really good climbers. Oh, and in fact, I've got to watch out because Pepper does a bit of a trick. Are you going to do your trick, Pepper, or not? Pepper's actually licking her lips today, which is quite cool. Now, these guys have a tail where it helps them to climb. It's like a monkey's tail. Look at that. Ooh. Okay, and that tail is called a prehensile tail. So it helps them to cling onto branches. They have got sticky feet, and they may also do a trick. Are you going to do your trick for me today? 3. Let's keep looking and talking. So these guys like eating. Oh, there you go, little one. You see, they jump. So they can jump from branch to branch. And these have been found up to 50 feet up in the trees. And they live in the forests of New Caledonia, which are a group of islands just near Australia, which sort of separated from Australia many years ago. 3, 2, 1, you're going to do a jump. Oh no, just going to do a climb. So these guys actually as well, something else you should know is that they're nocturnal. So if you look at their eye, they have a little line for a pupil. It's because normally they'd be asleep. Ooh. Whoa! Did you see that? That was pretty cool, eh? So they have a habit of jumping, but Pepper's not as jumpy as normal because Pepper's actually just woken up, all right? But those feet are incredible. Now look how good these feet are for climbing. Let's see if I can show you. I might have to move this plant now. Let's just see if we, whoa! That's fantastic, Pepper. You're almost demonstrating what I want you to. Right, watch this. 3. Look at that. They can climb on any surface, however sticky, so even glass, and that's what makes them perfectly adapted for climbing in trees. And that with that jump, can you imagine them jumping from branch to branch? Now when we think of rainforests as well, we think that they are full of lots of plants. We think that they have a lot of rainfall as well, hence their name, so the humidity is quite high. So another type of animal that we're not going to hold, but I might be able to show you, are, can you see these? I don't know if you can see these properly, but these are little frogs. Okay, so I keep lots of dart frogs. These are actually a frog, a fire-bellied, well, they're actually called fire-bellied toads, which is a bit wrong because they're actually not toads, they're actually frogs. But we get a lot of amphibian species in rainforests, and that's because of the humidity. So they like living, some will live on the forest floor, okay, so like these guys, and these are very similar to the dart frogs that we keep in these enclosures here. Okay, so when we think of dart frogs, those really colourful frogs that live in tropical rainforests, we have those here, okay? And they tend to live on the forest floor, climb a little bit. And then we have tree frogs that climb really high up to the top. So they're very much like that crested gecko Pepper who can jump from place to place. Now, who would like to see one more rainforest animal before we change habitats? Would you like to see one that maybe can live on the ground and in trees and maybe is a bit bigger? You've got to nod your head if you would like to see one. Okay, let's go and show you one. Now this is one that might scare your teachers, but it's actually a really nice animal. Let me go over and have a little look. So I've got to come over to one of my enclosures. Now the animal that I'm getting out is called Rita. Okay? Now, let's see if Rita wants to come and say hello to all you lovely Year 2 students. Oh yes, she does. Whoa. Look what we've got here. We've got a snake. And this is an amazing snake called a reticulated python, okay? This is a young reticulated python. It won't grow too big, okay? But some of these guys grow to be the biggest snakes in the world. Can you imagine that? Up to 20 or even 30 foot long. Now, they're an amazing climber, so you'll see this snake will climb on me quite a lot, all right? And they actually come from Borneo, which if you've ever heard about palm oil, and you've ever heard about what's happening there with trees being chopped down, and you often hear about orangutans and how they're losing their homes, that's where these guys live, all right? They'll live in other parts as well. They have quite a wide distribution, but all of a sudden their forest is disappearing, which is a real worry. But they're an amazing snake. They've got this amazing eye. Now you notice with the snake that Rita, her tongue is going, and that's because she's tasting the air. So if you didn't know, snakes don't smell with their noses, they smell through their tongues, okay? So they taste the air, and they've got forked tongue because they can taste almost in stereo, the same way we have 2 ears and 2 eyes. Isn't that cool? You're learning something today, all right? Ooh, look at that. And snakes love a cuddle. They're very calm. They're not scary animals. They don't want to hurt people. They just want to cling on. They don't want to get dropped. So a snake that grabs around you a bit, it's not trying to eat me. It's just trying to hang on to me, okay? Something else to know about snakes is if you've got someone in your family who's scared of snakes, and they ever see one, whether it be a pet or one in the wild, and they do this, it's not going to do anything because snakes are actually deaf. They can't hear anything, all right? So shrieking at a snake is not really going to help. Now these guys will feed on all kinds of things, including mammals, so like rodents, but they'll also eat birds and things like that. So they are carnivores. I'm afraid there are no snakes that eat plants. They all eat meat, but they don't go around killing lots. They only need to eat about every week, every 2 weeks. Maybe in the wild, if they have a large meal, they could go for like a month or something, or a couple of months without food. In fact, some of the snakes that I keep, royal pythons, they can go for up to a year without food. So they don't eat a huge amount, they eat big meals, but not that often. Isn't that an amazing animal? Whoa. So a really cool rainforest. Now we do get snakes in deserts and different habitats like that, which brings me on to my next habitat. Should we change habitats? Okay, you ready? I'm going to try something. I'm going to try maybe and change. So I'm going to try this. 1, 2, 3. G'day! We're now in a desert. Can you believe it? Hence my Australian sun hat, because you've always got to wear a hat when you're in the desert. Should we take that off for a sec? Let's get rid of that one. We don't need that one for a minute, do we? Ooh, and almost knocked stuff over. Right, guys, so I just thought I'd show you a couple more animals before I finish, which is moving on to a different habitat. So I thought we'd talk about desert and how maybe desert animals might vary from those animals that we've seen. So those animals with the sticky feet, with the curly tail, with the camouflage, with the ability to move in certain ways, those animals are perfectly adapted for rainforests. But actually, some animals are perfectly adapted for desert environments where it's really harsh, all right? And one of these animals actually is one of my favourite, which I'll just get from this enclosure here. If I can find one. Hello. Oh yes, here we go. Which is these. Now, I quite like showing off these guys, because these guys are a really great comparison for a crested gecko. This is a leopard gecko, and leopard geckos live in a desert. Now in a desert, there's not very much food around, so you have to eat and you have to store the fat. So these guys have a nice big fat tail where they store the fat. So a healthy leopard gecko should have a big fat tail. Now the other thing that I didn't tell you about a crested gecko is that they actually have no eyelids. The way they clean their eyes is by licking them. Can any of you lick your own eyes? I can't, okay? But these guys, because they live in a desert, they actually have eyelids. So if you've ever been to the beach when it's windy and the sand blows everywhere and gets in your eyes and hits you on the legs, these guys have eyelids which can actually protect their eyes, which is really, really cool, okay? Now those fat tails, as well as storing fat in it, it's also a defense mechanism. So if something like a bird or a predator or something is gonna eat one of these, it doesn't know which end is the head. So if I show you on my top, maybe you can see it a bit better. If it grabs the tail actually falls off, all right? It does regrow back with these guys. With the crested geckos, they have the same mechanism, but their tails will never grow back, so it's really important that they don't get grabbed by the tail. But for leopard geckos in the wild, where they're more likely to be maybe predated on, that tail mechanism will grow back. Now something really cool about these guys is when the mums lay their eggs, and they lay pairs of eggs sort of every month or so in the breeding season, if the eggs are laid somewhere really hot, about 29 degrees, they'll hatch as boys. If they're laid somewhere very cool, they'll hatch as girls. And if they're laid somewhere in the middle, they'll hatch some boys and some girls. So for global warming, if the world gets hotter and hotter, you might only get boys of this species. And actually that affects turtles, and it affects crocodiles, and it affects lots of other reptiles as well, whereby the eggs hatch at different sexes depending on whether they're hot or they're cold. You can imagine that yellow pattern would blend in perfectly into a desert, wouldn't you? And as well, they don't have the sticky feet. I don't know whether you can see, they've got little claws. So the little claws are actually for gripping, and they're for digging, but they haven't got those sticky feet. So it's perfectly adapted, even though it's another gecko, to actually live in a desert. Now I've got one last animal before I'm going to say goodbye to you guys, all right? So I'm going to put my gecko back. Bearing in mind, one of these is my oldest ever reptile, and I got it when I was 11 years old, Norman, and he's still here. He's 29 years old. I think he's the world's oldest leopard gecko. Now, just sleeping underneath here is another one of my desert friends. Oh, and this one actually is a really good one. I should have maybe started with this when I had my Australian sun hat on, because this is a bearded dragon, all right? And these guys live in Australia. Okay, they're an Australian lizard, and they live in the desert where they love to sunbathe. So what they do is they can actually turn their body towards the sunlight, flatten their back, and absorb as much sunlight as possible. And some of these animals actually are nocturnal. So the crested gecko and the leopard gecko are nocturnal, but this girl, Amber, if you look at her eyes, she has a round pupil like us because she's awake in the day. So she's what we call diurnal. So she would wake up when the sun comes up, sunbathe, and then warm up, and then she's warm enough to eat and do everything else that a bearded dragon does. Okay? She's quite incredible. Now, one of the ways that she finds where the sun is she actually has a scale that's a secret eye on her head, and it can actually sense the light. So she can actually see where the sun is based on that light-sensitive scale. We refer to it as a third eye, actually, and then they can turn their body. Again, she's got these big, powerful claws for digging, okay? She doesn't lose her tail at all, okay? But what she does do if a predator comes up to her is, this is where she gets her name, she puffs her beard up and looks really fierce and scary and opens her mouth. So a bit like a dinosaur, if you've ever seen like a Jurassic Park or something like that, then they scare away the predators. So that works really well. They don't tend to bite. They're really, really friendly animals. She's a little bit slower this time of year because they do something called promating when they go to sleep, all right? Because if the winter's really harsh, they eat a bit less food, they sleep a bit more. If you feel a bit tired in the winter, that's what these guys do. They feel a bit tired and a bit sleepy, and they don't do quite as much. But they perfectly adapted to live in a desert. Now, I said they couldn't be fussy. These guys aren't fussy eaters. They're the only animal that I've showed you today that is what I call an omnivore. So what they eat is bugs and insects, but they also eat plants. So in a desert, you can't be fussy. Whatever food there is, whether there's a plant or whether there's some insects or some bugs or something like that, they have to eat it because they don't know where they're going to get their next meal from. So it's really important that they eat, because a desert is a very harsh environment, isn't it? All right, she's pretty gorgeous. These guys as well can change colour based on their mood. So if they're really happy, they go nice orange colour. If they're sad, they go really, really black. Now, do you think Amber is happy today or sad? That's absolutely right. She's super duper happy. She loves showing off and seeing people, and she loves a cuddle and a stroke. Okay, so we've looked at two habitats. We've looked at rainforest, we've looked at deserts. Two extremes, two completely different habitats where animals have adapted and can thrive, all right? And animals can do that. They can adapt over lots of years, and they're perfectly suited for specific habitats. That's why it's important we look after all habitats, whether it be frozen habitats, desert habitats, rainforest habitats. It's really important, whatever the habitat, that we as a species, us humans, try and do all the right things and make sure we look after that. Okay, guys, I would have loved to visit your school, but our visits aren't going on too often at the minute, and also, you know, I'm down in Devon and you guys are up in Bristol. But it's been lovely to show off some of my animals. I send my love to you. Take care. I hope you have a great Christmas, and maybe one day you'll see me or some of my animals, or maybe you'll see some of these amazing animals somewhere else. Okay, so take care. Nice to see you. Bye.